They say silence can be peaceful. But there's one kind of silence that's heavy, almost haunting. It's the silence surrounding older people and desire, especially when you live alone. Society rarely talks about it. After a certain age, it's like someone quietly flips the switch off, assuming you've stopped wanting, stopped feeling, stopped exploring. But that's not true. Not even close. I haven't shared my body with another person since I was 34. That was almost 3 decades ago. And yet, my relationship with intimacy didn't vanish. It simply changed shape. I didn't set out to become celibate. Life just unfolded that way. But I've learned to find something beautiful in the solitude. And yes, something deeply human in the quiet rituals I keep for myself. Some people still think celibacy means shutting off all forms of desire. That it's about denial, abstinence, distance from pleasure. But what if it's actually the opposite? What if staying connected to your body, on your own terms, is what keeps the commitment alive? Today, I want to share a side of this story that's rarely spoken out loud. A story of touch, of loneliness, of peace, of devotion, and above all, honesty. If this is your first time here, I hope you'll subscribe and share this with someone who might need to hear it. Because being older doesn't mean being invisible. And being alone doesn't mean being without love or even sensuality. So let's talk about what it really means to live solo and still live fully. I used to think celibacy was a kind of emptiness. A dry, disciplined space where desire was supposed to disappear in service of something higher, spirituality, purpose, self-control. That's how it was taught to me growing up Catholic. Celibacy meant no intimacy, no closeness, no release, no exceptions, especially not the kind you give yourself. But the more I lived it, the more I realized that definition never fit. Not for me and not for many others who walk this path. Celibacy isn't about becoming less human, it's about becoming more honest. And that honesty includes the quiet rituals that no one else sees. For me, self-pleasure didn't feel like a violation of anything. It felt like a grounding practice. A way of saying, yes, I'm still here. I still feel. I still matter. It's not about fantasy or indulgence, it's about presence. A simple reminder that even without a partner, I am still a body. Still deserving of care. Still capable of warmth. I once read something that stuck with me, a quote from a former priest. He said, "Masturbation is to celibacy what intercourse is to marriage." And I couldn't agree more. It's not just a physical act. It's a ritual of remembrance. A way to stay tethered to your own humanness. It doesn't break the vow, it supports it. It helps you stay in touch with the solitude you've chosen or accepted, without falling into numbness or detachment. And if that surprises you, then maybe it's time we rethink what celibacy really means. It's strange how people talk about purity, like it's something you can lose with a single touch, or preserve by simply avoiding pleasure. Especially in religious spaces, the idea of purity has often been tied to abstinence. No sex, no thoughts, no desires. But that view always felt too narrow, too harsh, too disconnected from real life. The truth is, abstinence doesn't automatically make you pure, and pleasure doesn't make you impure. We are complex beings, emotional, physical, spiritual. Pretending that one part of ourselves doesn't exist doesn't make us holy. It makes us incomplete. Over the years, I've met others who live celibate lives, some by choice, some by circumstance. Many of them still struggle with shame. Not because they're doing something wrong, but because they were taught to feel guilty for listening to their own bodies. But shame has no place in something so personal, so gentle, and so honest. When I touch myself, it's not out of boredom or desperation. It's not a fallback plan. It's a conscious decision to stay connected, to care for myself in a way that feels respectful, mindful, and whole. I don't hide from that part of myself. I don't silence it to fit someone else's definition of purity. Purity, to me, isn't about denying who you are. It's about living with integrity, being truthful about your needs, and treating your own body with the same kindness you'd offer to someone you love. Living alone after a certain age can be many things: peaceful, quiet, sometimes heavy. The silence stretches longer. The days have more stillness. And in that stillness, you begin to face parts of yourself you once ignored. There's no partner to distract you, no shared bed, no routine built around someone else. It's just you and everything you carry. But with time, solitude stops feeling like absence. It becomes its own kind of presence. You start to realize that being alone doesn't mean being unloved. It means learning how to be with yourself in a deeper way. That's what self-touch has become for me, not just a physical act, but a spiritual one. A way of grounding myself when the world feels distant. A way of saying, I'm still worthy of closeness, even if it's with myself. It doesn't replace companionship. It doesn't pretend to. But it fills a different space, a quieter, more reflective one. One that isn't about performance or expectation, but simply presence. You breathe slower. You pay attention. You aren't in a rush to finish anything. You're just here, in this body, in this moment, honoring the life still moving through you. People often ask if I miss having a partner. Of course I do. But what I don't miss is the need to rely on someone else to feel whole. Solitude, when you make peace with it, becomes sacred. And in that space, I've discovered a kind of intimacy that's just as real as anything I've shared with another person. There's something deeply human about the need for touch. It's one of the first ways we learn we're alive, held, cradled, comforted. And yet, as we get older, touch becomes more rare. Friends hug less. Family grows distant. Bodies grow fragile, and sometimes even doctors forget to offer a warm hand. But our need for touch doesn't fade with age. It simply grows quieter, more tender, more internal. And in the absence of another's touch, I've learned how to offer it to myself, not just as release, but as reverence. When I lay a hand on my own skin, it's not out of routine. It's not mechanical. It's not rushed. It's a way of saying, you still matter. You are still here. This body has carried you through so much, and it deserves to be treated with care. Touch becomes a language. A way of listening inward. A way of praying not with words, but with presence. Sometimes I think about how, in religious traditions, the body is often spoken of as a temple. But how rarely we treat it that way, especially in solitude. We worry it's too old, too soft, too quiet to deserve celebration. But every wrinkle is a line in a story. Every sigh, a hymn. And this touch, even when it's private and unseen, becomes an act of devotion. I no longer think of self-pleasure as something secret or shameful. I think of it as something sacred, a ritual of healing, a reminder that the soul lives in the body, not above it. I didn't wake up one day free of shame. It lingered, quiet, stubborn, inherited. It came from whispered warnings, sideways glances, and years of being told that certain parts of yourself were better left unspoken. Especially when you're older, when you're expected to have moved beyond such things. But the shame didn't belong to me. It was passed down, layer by layer, from people who were also trying to make peace with their own bodies and their own pasts. And it took me years to see it for what it was, a shadow, not a truth. Reclaiming peace with myself meant unlearning that shame. And it started not with rebellion, but with compassion. I stopped asking, is this wrong? And started asking, is this honest? I stopped hiding from the mirror. I stopped apologizing in my mind. I started sitting with the feeling, not rushing, not resisting, just being there, in the quiet, where the shame used to live. And slowly, something shifted. Masturbation, for me, became more than physical. It became a practice of self-respect. It wasn't about fantasy or escape. It was about reminding myself that pleasure isn't something reserved for youth or romance or someone else's approval. It's something every human deserves access to for their entire life. Especially in older age when we've been taught to grow invisible. The peace I feel now doesn't come from pushing anything away. It comes from embracing what's always been there, desire, tenderness, vulnerability. There's nothing dirty about that. Nothing unholy. In fact, it might be the most honest thing I've ever known. We live in a world that treats intimacy like it only happens between lovers. That unless someone else is touching you, looking at you, wanting you, you're not really experiencing it. But that's not true. Intimacy is bigger than sex. Bigger than romance. It's about presence and softness and the courage to be real with yourself. Over the years, I've learned that the most meaningful intimacy I've experienced didn't come from a partner. It came from slowing down, from being fully in my body, from allowing myself to feel without rushing away. And that happens most often when I'm alone. In those quiet moments, I don't miss the friction of another person, I miss the feeling of being understood. But then I remind myself, I can give that to myself too. I can meet myself with gentleness. I can be present even if no one else is. That's still intimacy. Maybe even the most important kind. Touching myself now isn't about pretending someone else is there. It's about honoring that I am here. Still feeling. Still alive. Still worthy of closeness, even if it's a closeness with my own breath, my own skin, my own heart beating quietly in a room only I occupy. There is dignity in that. There is power. And for those of us who've spent decades being told that pleasure has an expiration date, or that intimacy must be shared to be real, I can tell you this: solitude can be just as sacred. Because at the end of the day, intimacy isn't about who's touching you. It's about how deeply you're willing to touch your own life. There was a time when I feared growing older meant losing everything sensual, touch, desire, tenderness. As if the body simply turns off, and all that's left is memory. But aging doesn't shut the door on sensuality. It opens a new one. A quieter, deeper one. When I was younger, intimacy was fast, urgent, filled with expectation. But now, it's spacious. It's thoughtful. It asks me to listen, not just act. To be gentle, not just hungry. And in that space, I found something more enduring than youth ever gave me: presence. Pleasure looks different at 60 or 70 than it did at 30, but it hasn't disappeared. It's evolved. My hands are slower. My thoughts wander less. I don't chase a finish line anymore. I focus on the journey. The way my breath changes, the way my body responds when I treat it like something sacred. There's wisdom in that shift. Kind of grace. I know now that the point isn't to mimic the past. It's to embrace what's real now. To let go of the performance, the pressure, the noise. What remains is honest. What remains is enough. And if there's anything I'd say to someone growing older, wondering if it's too late to feel pleasure, to feel whole, it's this: it's never too late. Not for intimacy. Not for tenderness. Not for you. So here I am. Decades into a life lived without a partner, but never without meaning. A life marked not by absence, but by presence. One where celibacy isn't a loss, it's a choice I've learned to live fully. And self-pleasure? It's not a contradiction to that choice. It's a companion, a practice, a quiet affirmation that this body, this heart, still matters. We often measure intimacy by who we're with. But I've learned to measure it by how deeply I'm willing to sit with myself, to feel what's real, to offer care without condition, to touch not just skin, but the spirit beneath it. This journey hasn't always been easy. There were years of silence, of guilt, of questions I didn't know how to answer. But with time and honesty and a little courage, I've made peace with my path. I've stopped chasing the past. I've stopped waiting for permission. I've learned to give myself what I once thought had to come from someone else: comfort, connection, closeness. If you're listening to this and something inside you feels seen, then I hope you know this: you are not broken. You are not too late. You are not alone. Whether you share your bed or sleep in it alone, your body is still yours. Your pleasure is still yours. Your dignity is still yours. And when you take the time to honor that, quietly, privately, tenderly, you're not giving up on intimacy. You're redefining it, on your own terms. So breathe, be still, and remember, you are still here, and you are still whole. If you've made it all the way to the end, thank you. That means something here resonated with you, maybe in a quiet way, maybe in a deep way. Maybe you're living a similar story. Or maybe you're just beginning to ask the kinds of questions we're often told to keep to ourselves. So, if this video meant something to you, I'm asking you to do 3 small things. Click the like button. It helps share this message with others who might need to hear it. Subscribe if you want more honest, respectful content about aging, solitude, intimacy, and self-understanding. And most importantly, leave a comment with these words. I'm learning to be gentle with myself. It's simple, but it's powerful. And by writing it, you're helping build a space where we can talk about pleasure, loneliness, healing, and humanity without shame. Thank you again for being here. Take care of yourself, softly, fully, and unapologetically.